the younger generations, they are talking about it. They want to talk about it and they want to support and help their friends. And so just the younger generation in general brings me so much hope that there are brighter days ahead, and that if someone is struggling, they aren't alone, and they'll know they'll have someone there by their side.
Hello, and welcome to Mindshift, a PLCS Empowerment Collective podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Christopher.
I'm Deb. I'm your other co-host. Welcome.
And Deb, today we are talking about a topic that is very important and at the same time something that I think we're often scared to talk about.
We are. This is another, I think we've had a few topics on our podcast that are dealing with sensitive issues, and this one is one of them because we're going to be talking about suicide. So there's going to be a lot here, Christopher.
And one of the things I think to put a positive spin on it is that the angle is to talk more about suicide prevention and how can we help parents and teachers to feel better equipped to help prevent students from attempting suicide. There's a little bit of a myth that talking about it more creates more risk. And I'm hoping that we can talk through that a little bit because I think it's an important conversation.
And it is a myth. One of the things we have in our district is we have Hope Squads, which are students who are educated about suicide prevention, and they are actually carrying the message far better than the adults are because they're not afraid to talk about it.
And to help us with our conversation today, we do have an expert joining us, so please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Christopher and Deb. I'm Julia Hebenstreit. I'm local here in the Omaha community and have worked in the area of mental health promotion and suicide prevention and postvention for the last 14 years. So, as you said, it can be a very heavy topic, but one that I commend you for covering, and just hope that parents and educators out there listening will take something from today.
So one of the first things we want you to talk about, Julia, is definition. So can you talk about what suicide prevention work looks like? What is that?
Yeah, suicide prevention can be anything that's promoting and building hope and resiliency in our community. And so I think taking that broader look at it can be helpful for people, and also take some of that fear and uncertainty out of it, because we all want to be hopeful. We all want to be positive. We all want to be resilient. And when we're looking at it in terms of being able to build that up in our youth, that seems a little easier for people to swallow and take on.
And thinking about kind of what I said before, right? That there is a little bit of this myth that talking about suicide creates more risk. Can you talk about maybe where that comes from, and then give us some information on why it is just a myth?
That's actually one of the biggest myths out there around suicide, is that if we talk about it, it's going to put the idea in the kid's head or in the individual's head. And the truth is, many of us have lost loved ones or friends or community members, colleagues to suicide, unfortunately. And so the awareness of the actual topic is out there. And so us talking about it isn't going to put the idea in the youth's mind. We would rather provide responsible, reliable information and tools to them. So if people can shift that mindset to being like, no, we're empowering them with correct information and how to handle that so they know what to do. But yes, unfortunately, that has been a longstanding myth.
So Julia, when you talk about responsible and reliable tools, and I'm thinking about our students, what are the tools that kids need to help one another or help themselves so that they can promote their own hope and resilience?
So 2 really great first steps are knowing the warning signs and building a wellness plan. And so you want to watch for really it's changes in patterns of their behavior. So it could be they're sleeping too much or too little, they're eating too much or too little, they're becoming more reckless and impulsive, they are withdrawing and isolating from previously enjoyed activities or people. And just because you notice or identify those warning signs in someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're suicidal, but it's, you can ask the question and check in on them. Oftentimes people think, oh, if we ask about it, they're not going to talk to me, they don't trust me. But in reality, taking that initiative to ask the question can make a world of difference for someone. So warning signs, knowing those, that's the biggest first step or tool. I think creating safety plans, everyone should have. And if safety plan sounds too clinical for someone, it could be a wellness plan. So I would encourage parents and educators, anyone out there interacting with youth, to help that youth build a wellness plan. But you want to do it when they're feeling healthy and well, because when someone's really struggling, it's difficult to identify, like, these are my three people. This is who I can reach out to when I'm struggling. Or if I start feeling anxious, this is what helps calm me down, whether it's music or breathing or a pet. When you're really struggling, it's difficult to identify those things. Those are great tools. There's so many out there, but yeah, there's some takeaways right there.
I want to come back to having a safety plan or having a wellness plan. You dropped a couple of tidbits there about what could be included in that. It sounded like identifying people, kind of trusted adults or friends maybe, and some activities that help you to feel better.
Hmm.
So, one, I'm asking for clarification. Are those things that should be included in this plan? And then two, my question is, with something like that, when we say plan, to me, it means I need to have a document with, like, written out, an outline, all the detail, but I don't think it needs to be that formal in this case.
Right. Yeah. So a couple points there. Some people really do like to write it out and make it very pretty and colorful, and that speaks to them. But it could just be verbalizing the plan. I always think it's helpful to have it written out in some form, because, again, when you come to that moment that either yourself or someone is in crisis, it's difficult to recall, even if you have the conversation. And the people, or whoever, we like to say that it can be, who are your three? Who are your three people that you can turn to? And again, when you're feeling healthy and well, it's more important to identify those. And I think, especially in the school setting, there's this perception that, oh, they're going to go to the counselor, or they're going to, depending on the school structure, if they have social workers or therapists, whatever that may look like. And that's the go to. And that very well may be who they do turn to. But if you help them get a little creative beyond that, youth are making relationships with people at school all the time. Maybe it's someone in the cafeteria. Maybe it's one of the maintenance team, and they see them in the hall, and every day they ask, hey, how you doing today? Or, they've built up a rapport with them. Maybe it's a coach, a mentor, a teacher. There's so many people that youth interact with in school on a daily basis. So I just encourage people not to get stuck on the counselors, social workers, therapists, the traditional, in that sense. And again, it may be those people, but it can also be others. So helping to identify those individuals for every person. And as adults, we should do the same thing. So that when you are struggling, there's even an app out there called My3. You could put that on your phone so that you have the contacts right there and can reach out to them.
So one of the things that I want to get to, how to ask the question. We teach in our district, we teach QPR, question, persuade, refer, which is one of the suicide prevention education evidence-based models. And we teach it to our students as well that are in the Hope Squad. And the thing that some people can get hung up on is asking the question. And I know you said you should practice. What I've noticed is that most of the time when I have people practice is that they get frustrated with the indirect questions, and they just want people to ask, are you feeling like you don't want to live anymore? Or do you want to kill yourself? Or however you ask it. And that seems to be the hardest thing.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to hear your advice.
Yeah. So we find that people think like it's easier to say, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Or are you thinking of harming yourself? And actually, to someone who's truly suicidal or in crisis, to them, they're going to end that pain. They feel like, I'm not going to be hurting anymore. So you really want to avoid, are you thinking of hurting yourself or harming yourself, if possible. I do understand that rolls off the tongue a little easier for some people, but if possible, avoid that language and just be as direct as you can, because you're right, those indirect questions can really frustrate people, especially if they're really struggling in that moment and they just are waiting for someone to extend that, that help in any way. So are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? Do you still want to live? Are you thinking of killing? Just anything that's very direct. And then I say that, but make sure, some people are like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse? It's more that person is going to remember that you were there to support them and that you helped them through that moment, then remember exactly what you said. It's just you'll get to the truth faster if you can be direct and be there for that individual in that moment.
And I have a kind of a follow up on the worrying about saying the wrong thing, because I am a parent to a 5-year-old, and I'm worrying all the time that I'm screwing him up for life. It just is. I feel like that's millennial parents. Like, we're just worried that we're messing everything up.
I think that's
And
parents in general, Christopher.
so this is going to sound like a little bit of a bird walk, but I promise it comes back around.
Okay.
The other day, my son was telling me this story about how he was playing a game and somebody was mean to him. Okay. And that it made him sad. And then he said, but I didn't tell anybody because I just said, don't worry about it. And I was like, and that it stuck with me because I say that a lot
Mhm.
about things that are not, well, I shouldn't say important, but things that are not important. Like, oh, why are we having Colby Jack cheese instead of string cheese today? Don't worry about it. It's
Mhm.
not like it's not a big deal, you know? And so my son comes to me feeling proud in this moment that he told himself, don't worry about it. But those are things that I want to address. And I think that kind of leans in a little bit to some of that, the way that we have these conversations when we feel uncomfortable about them, we use phrases like, don't worry about it, or just stay positive and you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And I think those can be a little bit more harmful than helpful in those situations. And so when you talk about worrying about saying the wrong thing,
Mhm.
are there phrases that aren't necessarily the wrong thing, right? Because your heart is in it, your intent is in the right place, but maybe that we want to try to avoid in that context?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So you don't want to make light of it. You don't want to say, don't worry about it. Just get over it. And one thing, and I am a parent. So I say this, just as one of many of you listening, we listen to our youth talk about things that are going on in your life. And I think every single one of us have said at some moment, like, it's not that big a deal. In your head, you're thinking this. You might not say it out loud, but it's not that big a deal. You're gonna get over this, in 5 months, 5 years, whatever it may be, 5 days, you won't even think about that anymore. But that can be very harmful in this situation. If someone is expressing their feelings and what they're going through, you absolutely need to validate that for them. Because while it may not seem like a big deal to you in that moment, it clearly is very much so to them. And so you want to try and avoid making light of it, just brushing it aside and taking that route, because then that individual is not going to feel heard. And it probably took a lot of courage for them to come to you in the first place. And so then there's one trusted person they're not going to come to again. And so you want to avoid that. And the other piece of that, too, sort of ties in is, especially with our youth when they're talking to friends and friends are disclosing things to them. And, Deb, you mentioned Hope Squads. They're trained in this, obviously, for everyone that is a member of Hope Squad, but you don't want to keep it a secret. Oftentimes we hear from youth like, well, my best friend said this, but they said I couldn't tell anyone, or my boyfriend told me this, and he said, he'd break up with me if I said anything. In these instances, you absolutely need to empower them to tell someone, tell a trusted adult, whoever that may be, because one, it's far too much for them to take on themselves. And two, and this sounds very harsh and just kind of there, but you would much rather have your friend or boyfriend here with you in a week or a month than not because you didn't say anything. So I think that kind of veers off a different direction, but same in the sense of brushing it aside or not communicating that in an effective way.
Isn't that also something that the 988 National Suicide Lifeline can help with? If you have a friend or loved one who is expressing those thoughts and having those feelings and they've confided that in you and you don't know what to do with that information, isn't that a resource that you can go to for support there?
Absolutely. 988 is a fantastic resource. You can call, text, or chat 24/7. It's free and confidential. And for students and parents alike, educators, one thing I encourage them to do is, like, let's say someone discloses that they're really struggling and you just, not all of us know exactly what to do or what the right answer is. You can call 988 either to discuss, if whether the individual is still there. Let's say a parent, hears this and so they're like, gosh, what do I do? They can call 988 and talk to a trained crisis counselor about what are the next right steps. What should I be doing? Now, keep in mind, it's going to they take the calls based on severity. So if it's someone calling just to ask, maybe what should I say or what should I do, depending on call volume, that may take a minute. But absolutely, the other great thing is you could call as a parent or educator or friend with the individual with you and put it on speakerphone, and you can both hear that information together. And the crisis counselor is going to be able to assess the severity of it and recommend next steps.
You know what I love about this is that everything we've been talking about here at the end is that people are not alone, and that there are ways we can build community and do this together in an open way. So as we wrap up, Julia, I wonder if you could answer our final question, which is, what gives you hope about creating a world where no young person suffers alone?
What a great question. Wow. I think what you all are doing and our community, I have to say in my 14, 15 years of doing this work, just the shift in people's willingness to have the conversation and shed light on something that's so important but so difficult. To me, that brings me hope, just to know that things have changed. And you mentioned early on, Deb, that the younger generations, they are talking about it. They want to talk about it, and they want to support and help their friends. And so just the younger generation in general brings me so much hope that there are brighter days ahead, and that if someone is struggling, they aren't alone, and they'll know they'll have someone there by their side.
Julia, this has been a really great conversation, a lot of practical information, which I think is what our listeners love. So I appreciate you being here and sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you, listener, for listening to Mindshift. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit us online at plcschools.org/Mindshift for more content. And be sure to join us next week when we'll be talking about vaping.